She tried to rewrite our family with corporate buzzwords: cut off, boundaries, no help. I let her walk into a lesson that could cost her everything.
The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and celebration as I stood on the deck of my Malibu beach house, watching my daughter Emma park her Tesla in the circular driveway below. 25 years of marriage to her mother, and today we were celebrating our silver anniversary in the place that had become our family sanctuary, the house that had witnessed countless birthdays, graduations, and holidays, the house where Emma had learned to swim in the infinity pool overlooking the Pacific, the house that, in just a few hours, would become the center of a betrayal so devastating it would change everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I adjusted my tie one more time, the same navy blue one I'd worn to Emma's college graduation 3 years ago. Sarah was in the kitchen putting finishing touches on the dinner she'd spent all day preparing, her grandmother's famous seafood risotto that Emma had always claimed was her favorite dish. The dining room table gleamed with our wedding china, crystal glasses catching the golden afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's cars. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. Emma climbed the stone steps to our front door, and I couldn't help but smile at how much she looked like her mother at that age. Same auburn hair, same determined stride, same way of carrying herself like she owned whatever room she entered. At 23, she'd already landed a position at one of LA's most prestigious marketing firms, pulling down 6 figures while most of her college friends were still figuring out their lives. We'd raised her right, Sarah and I, given her every opportunity, every advantage money could provide. Private schools, summer camps in Europe, a BMW for her 16th birthday because she'd made honor roll. When she wanted to study abroad in London, we'd written the check without hesitation. When her sorority dues stretched into the thousands, we'd covered those too. When she needed a security deposit for her Beverly Hills apartment, the money appeared in her account before she'd even finished asking. That's what parents do, right? We sacrifice so our children can have better lives than we did. Dad! Emma's voice rang out as she stepped onto the deck, designer heels clicking against the imported Italian tile. She wore a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my first car, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon that screamed expensive salon. The house looks incredible as always. I wrapped her in a hug, breathing in her familiar perfume mixed with something else. Something I couldn't quite identify. Nervousness, maybe, or guilt. Your mother's been cooking all day, I said, holding her at arm's length to get a good look at her. You know how she gets about these milestone celebrations. Emma's smile flickered for just a moment, so briefly I almost missed it. Where is Mom? Kitchen, naturally. You know she won't let the caterers handle the important stuff herself. We'd hired a full-service team for tonight's celebration. Nothing too elaborate, just family and a few close friends. Maybe 30 people total, but Sarah insisted on preparing Emma's favorite dishes personally. That was Sarah, always putting family first, always making sure every detail was perfect for the people she loved. Emma, sweetheart. Sarah appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel embroidered with tiny seashells. She looked radiant despite spending the day in the kitchen, her silver hair perfectly styled, wearing the emerald green dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. You look absolutely stunning. They embraced with the easy affection that had always made me proud of our family dynamic. Sarah had been an incredible mother, involved in every aspect of Emma's life without being overbearing. PTA president, soccer mom, the woman who never missed a school play or science fair. She'd given up her own career ambitions to focus on raising Emma, and she'd never once complained about the sacrifice. The risotto smells amazing, Emma said, but there was something forced about her enthusiasm. I've been craving it for weeks. Well, you'll have to wait a bit longer, Sarah laughed. Your father insisted on cocktails first. You know how he likes his traditions. It was true. I'd always been a creature of habit, someone who believed in doing things properly. Cocktail hour at 6, dinner at 7:30, toast with the champagne I'd been saving for this exact occasion. A 1998 Dom Perignon that had been aging in our wine cellar since Emma's high school graduation. I told Sarah we'd open it when something truly special happened. 25 years of marriage felt special enough. Actually, Emma said, her voice taking on a different tone, I need to talk to you both about something before everyone else arrives. Sarah and I exchanged glances. There was something in Emma's voice that made my chest tighten, with the first whisper of unease. The same feeling I'd gotten years ago, when she'd called to tell us about her first car accident, or when she'd failed organic chemistry sophomore year. Of course, honey, Sarah said immediately. Is everything all right? Emma looked out at the ocean for a long moment, watching waves crash against the rocks below our property. The same view she'd stared at as a child when she was working up courage to confess some minor mischief. But she wasn't a child anymore, and something told me this wasn't going to be about broken vases or missed curfews. Let's sit down, Emma said finally. We settled into the outdoor furniture arrangement I'd had custom designed for this deck. Italian leather cushions, teak frames that could withstand ocean air, everything positioned to take advantage of the million-dollar view. Sarah reached for my hand, a gesture so automatic after 25 years that I barely noticed it anymore. Emma remained standing, her hands clasped in front of her like she was about to deliver a business presentation, which, in hindsight, wasn't far from the truth. I need you both to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me, she began, her voice taking on the practiced cadence of someone who'd rehearsed these words. The education, the opportunities, this beautiful home where I've made so many memories. My unease was growing stronger. Emma was building up to something, and the careful way she was choosing her words made my stomach clench with anticipation. But I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about my life, my career, my future, she continued, and I've realized that I need to make some changes. Sarah squeezed my hand tighter. What kind of changes, sweetheart? Emma took a deep breath, and in that moment, I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Something cold and calculating that reminded me uncomfortably of her maternal grandfather, a man who'd built his fortune by knowing exactly when to cut his losses. I've accepted a position with a firm in New York, she said, a senior associate role with McKinsey & Company. It's an incredible opportunity, the kind of career move that only comes along once in a lifetime. Relief flooded through me. A job opportunity. Of course, that's what this was about. Emma had always been ambitious, driven to succeed in ways that made both Sarah and me proud. Moving across the country for career advancement was exactly the kind of bold decision we'd raised her to make. Emma, that's wonderful news, Sarah exclaimed, releasing my hand to clap her own together. McKinsey is one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world. When do you start? Next month, Emma said, and there was something in her tone that made my relief evaporate as quickly as it had arrived. Next month? I repeated. That's pretty quick, isn't it? What about your apartment here? Your job? I've already given notice at the firm, Emma said matter-of-factly, and I'm breaking my lease. The opportunity was too good to pass up. Sarah was practically bouncing with excitement. We're so proud of you, honey. New York is going to be such an adventure, and we can visit all the time. Maybe get a little pied-à-terre in Manhattan, so we have somewhere to stay when we come see you. Emma's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, and that cold feeling in my stomach returned with interest. Actually, Emma said slowly, that's part of what I need to discuss with you both. This move, this new chapter in my life, it's going to require some significant changes in how we interact as a family. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire I couldn't yet see. What do you mean? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Emma looked directly at me, and for the first time in her 23 years of life, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I mean that I think it's time for me to establish some healthy boundaries, she said. I love you both, but I've realized that our relationship has become somewhat codependent. The financial support, the constant check-ins, the expectation that I'll always be available for family events and celebrations. Sarah's face went pale. Codependent? Emma, we're your parents. Of course we want to be involved in your life. And that involvement has been wonderful, Emma said quickly, her tone taking on the patronizing quality of someone explaining something to a child. But I'm an adult now, and I need to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. This move to New York is my chance to build an independent life, free from the financial and emotional entanglements that have defined our relationship. Financial and emotional entanglements. 23 years of love, support, and sacrifice reduced to corporate buzzwords. I'm not sure I understand, I said carefully. Are you saying you don't want us to visit you in New York? I'm saying that I think we need to take a step back from the intensity of our current dynamic, Emma replied. No more monthly dinners, no more family vacations, no more emergency calls when something goes wrong in my life. I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not Emma whose parents solve all her problems. The words hit like physical blows. Sarah made a small sound of distress, her hand flying to her throat. Emma, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, I think you might be overreacting. Moving to New York doesn't mean we have to cut ties completely. I'm not cutting ties, Emma said, but her tone suggested otherwise. I'm establishing boundaries, healthy boundaries that will allow me to grow as an independent adult. I looked at my daughter, this young woman Sarah and I had poured our hearts and souls into raising, and felt something crack inside my chest. The Emma I'd known, the little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read just one more story, was gone. In her place stood this polished stranger speaking in therapy speak about boundaries and codependency. So what exactly are you proposing? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma reached into her purse and pulled out what looked like a typed document. Multiple pages, professionally formatted, with the kind of attention to detail that spoke of careful planning and consideration. I've put together a transition plan, she said, offering us the papers. Guidelines for how we can maintain a healthy relationship going forward while respecting each other's need for independence. I stared at the document in her outstretched hand, not moving to take it. A transition plan for our family relationship, written up like a business proposal. Emma, I said quietly, today is your mother's and my 25th wedding anniversary. She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I know the timing isn't ideal, but I wanted to tell you in person before I left. I thought it would be better to have this conversation now, in private, rather than letting things get awkward with everyone else here tonight. Awkward. She was worried about things getting awkward. Sarah finally reached for the document, her hands trembling slightly as she took it from Emma's grasp. I watched my wife's eyes move across the first page, saw her face grow paler with each line she read. Emma, Sarah whispered, this says no unscheduled contact, no visits without 30 days advance notice, no financial assistance of any kind. Those are the boundaries I need to establish, Emma said, her voice gaining strength as if she was relieved to finally have everything out in the open. I know it seems harsh, but I've been working with a therapist, and she says that sometimes you have to create firm boundaries to break unhealthy patterns. A therapist? Of course there was a therapist involved. Someone who'd never met us, never seen how our family functioned, but who'd apparently convinced our daughter that 23 years of love and support were actually toxic codependency. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and unfamiliar, not just at Emma, but at whatever process had led her to this moment. Whatever combination of influences and advice had convinced her that her parents were obstacles to overcome rather than people who loved her unconditionally. And what if we don't agree to these boundaries? I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Emma met my gaze steadily. Then I guess we won't have a relationship at all. The ultimatum hung between us like a blade. Accept her terms or lose her completely. Sarah was still reading the document, tears beginning to track down her cheeks. Emma, honey, we just want to be part of your life. We don't need to control you or solve all your problems. We just want to love you. And you can, Emma said, within these parameters. I think you'll find that our relationship will actually be healthier once we establish some proper boundaries. I looked at my daughter, this stranger in designer clothes standing on the deck of the home where she'd grown up, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The unconditional love I'd felt for her since the moment she was born was still there, but it was now mixed with something else, something darker and more complex. Disappointment, that was part of it, but there was more. I was looking at someone who'd been given every advantage, every opportunity, every comfort that money and love could provide. And her response was to hand us a typed document explaining why she needed to distance herself from the people who'd made it all possible. The guests would be arriving soon. Family friends who'd watched Emma grow up, who'd celebrate our anniversary and ask about her new job and her exciting move to New York. We'd have to smile and play the part of proud parents while our daughter sat at our table, eating the food her mother had prepared with love, already mentally calculating when she could make her escape. But Emma had made one critical error in her careful planning. She'd underestimated exactly who she was dealing with. I hadn't built a successful business by accepting ultimatums from people who thought they held all the cards. I hadn't accumulated the wealth that had provided Emma with her privileged lifestyle by backing down when someone tried to manipulate me. And I certainly hadn't spent 25 years learning how to protect the people I loved by letting anyone, even my own daughter, dictate terms to me. Emma wanted to establish boundaries. She wanted independence from financial and emotional entanglements. I was about to give her exactly what she'd asked for. But first, we had an anniversary dinner to get through. I forced my expression into something resembling parental pride, though the effort made my jaw ache. Well, I said, standing from my chair with deliberate calm. Congratulations on the new position, Emma. McKinsey is quite an achievement. Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, probably interpreting my measured response as acceptance. She had no idea that behind my composed exterior, I was already 3 steps ahead, calculating exactly how this was going to play out. Thank you, Dad. I knew you'd understand eventually. Eventually, as if I were a slow student finally grasping a difficult concept. Sarah was still clutching the document, her tears falling silently onto the expensive paper. 25 years of marriage had taught me to read every micro expression on my wife's face, and what I saw there wasn't just hurt, it was devastation, the kind of bone-deep betrayal that changes someone permanently. Your mother spent all day cooking your favorite meal, I said quietly. Emma glanced toward the kitchen, where the caterers were beginning to arrive for tonight's celebration. I know, and I appreciate it. That's why I wanted to have this conversation now before dinner, so we could clear the air. Clear the air, like 23 years of unconditional love was stale smoke that needed ventilating. Of course, I said, we wouldn't want anything to interfere with tonight's celebration. The first guest would arrive in less than 2 hours, Sarah's sister Linda, who'd flown in from Phoenix specifically for our anniversary, my business partner David and his wife, who'd been friends with our family since Emma was in elementary school, the Hendersons from next door, who'd watched Emma grow up and always asked about her accomplishments with genuine pride. All of them expecting to celebrate not just Sarah's and my marriage, but the beautiful family we'd built together. All of them unaware that our daughter had just handed us divorce papers for our relationship. I should probably go get ready, Emma said, checking her phone with the casual efficiency of someone who'd just completed an unpleasant but necessary task. What time did you say dinner was? 7:30, Sarah managed, her voice hoarse with suppressed emotion. Perfect. That gives me time to freshen up and maybe make a few calls about the New York move. She was already mentally checked out, already focused on her new life where we wouldn't exist except within the carefully controlled parameters she'd outlined in her transition plan. Emma disappeared into the house, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors with the same confident stride she'd inherited from her mother, leaving Sarah and me alone on the deck with the wreckage of our family celebration. Sarah looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Robert, what just happened? I sat back down beside her, taking her trembling hands in mine. The same hands that had held Emma as a newborn, that had packed countless school lunches, that had applauded at every recital and graduation. Our daughter just informed us that we're being downsized, I said. Sarah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She's serious about this, isn't she? This isn't some phase or rebellion. She actually means to cut us out of her life. I looked out at the Pacific, watching waves crash against rocks that had stood there for millions of years. Constant, unchanging, weathering every storm that came their way. Emma thought she could reshape our family dynamic with a typed document and corporate buzzwords, but she'd forgotten something crucial about the people who'd raised her. We were survivors. She means it, I confirmed. At least she thinks she does right now. What are we going to do? I squeezed Sarah's hands gently. We're going to get through tonight's dinner. We're going to celebrate our anniversary with the people who actually value being part of our lives. And then we're going to give Emma exactly what she's asking for. Sarah's eyes widened. You mean accept her boundaries? I mean, we're going to teach her what independence actually costs. Before Sarah could respond, the catering manager appeared on the deck, clipboard in hand and professional smile in place. Mr. Richardson, we're ready to begin setup for tonight's dinner service. Should we proceed with the original count of 30 guests? Yes, I said, not missing a beat. 30 guests, as planned. Emma would sit at our table tonight, eating food prepared with love by a mother she'd just emotionally abandoned. She'd smile and accept congratulations on her new job from people who'd known her since childhood. She'd probably even give a toast to Sarah's and my marriage, playing the role of dutiful daughter one last time before implementing her independence plan. But Emma had made a fundamental miscalculation. She'd assumed that because we'd always supported her unconditionally, we'd continue to do so even when she explicitly rejected that support. She was about to learn the difference between unconditional love and unlimited tolerance. As the caterers bustled around us, transforming our deck into an elegant dining space, I found myself thinking about the beach house itself, the property Sarah and I had bought 15 years ago, back when Emma was 8 years old and still believed her parents hung the moon. We'd searched for months to find the perfect place. Not just any oceanfront property, But this specific house, with its protected cove, its private beach access, its position on the bluffs that provided both privacy and spectacular views, the kind of rare coastal real estate that appreciated in value faster than most people's annual salaries. Emma had fallen in love with the house immediately. She'd claimed the bedroom with the best ocean view, spent entire summers here with friends, learned to surf in the gentle waves below our property. For 15 years, this had been her sanctuary, the place she always returned to when life got complicated. The place she'd probably expected to inherit someday. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Robert? Sarah looked at me with concern. Who are you calling? Our attorney, I said, listening to the phone ring. If Emma wants to establish new boundaries for our relationship, I think we need to establish some new boundaries of our own. Margaret Walsh had been handling our family's legal affairs for over a decade. Estate planning, business contracts, the kind of complex financial arrangements that came with significant wealth. She was also conveniently someone who worked weekends when the situation warranted it. Margaret, it's Robert Richardson. I need to discuss some urgent changes to our estate planning documents. Are you available this weekend? Sarah's eyes widened as she began to understand what I was planning. Yes, I know it's short notice, but there have been some significant changes in our family dynamics that require immediate attention. Can you meet us tomorrow morning? Excellent. 10 o'clock at your office. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Through the kitchen windows, I could see Emma helping herself to a glass of wine from the bottle we'd been saving for tonight's celebration. She was already making herself at home in the house she'd just informed us she no longer wanted to be emotionally connected to. Robert, Sarah said carefully, what are you planning? Emma wants independence from financial entanglements, I said. I'm going to give her the most complete independence possible. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Then, slowly, she began to nod. She thinks she can just walk away from 23 years of love and sacrifice with a piece of paper, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. She thinks we'll just accept being relegated to scheduled phone calls and supervised visits like we're some kind of toxic influence she needs to manage. She's about to learn what it actually means to be independent, I agreed. The sun was beginning to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples that had made this property so desirable. Emma's favorite time of day at the beach house, when she used to sit on the same deck and tell us about her dreams and ambitions. Dreams we'd funded, ambitions we'd supported, a future we'd helped make possible. But Emma had decided she wanted to build that future without us. She wanted the benefits of everything we'd provided while rejecting any ongoing relationship with the people who'd provided it. That was fine. She was an adult, as she'd been so eager to remind us. Adults got to make their own choices. They also got to live with the consequences of those choices. The first guests began arriving just after 6, their cheerful voices carrying across the evening air as they made their way up the stone steps to our front door. The same friends and family who'd celebrated every milestone in Emma's life, who'd watched her grow from a precocious child into the accomplished young woman she'd become. Emma emerged from the house looking every inch the successful professional. She'd changed into a different dress, something more appropriate for dinner with family friends. Her makeup was perfect, her smile bright and engaging. No trace of the bomb she'd detonated on our family just 2 hours earlier. The Hendersons are here, she announced cheerfully, and I think I saw the Mitchells pulling into the driveway. She was playing her role perfectly. The loving daughter celebrating her parents' milestone anniversary, excited about her new career opportunity in New York. No one would suspect that she'd just handed us a document outlining exactly how little she wanted us involved in her future life. But as I watched Emma greet our guests with practiced warmth, I noticed something she probably thought she was hiding. Her hands were shaking slightly when she thought no one was looking. Her smile never quite reached her eyes. She kept checking her phone obsessively, as if expecting some kind of rescue from the evening she'd committed herself to enduring. Emma was nervous. More than nervous, she was scared. Good, she should be. Because while she'd been planning her independence speech and drafting her transition document, she'd forgotten one crucial detail about the people who'd raised her. We hadn't built our wealth and success by being passive. We hadn't provided her with every advantage by being pushovers. And we certainly hadn't created the comfortable, privileged life she was so eager to distance herself from by accepting ultimatums from people who took our generosity for granted. Emma wanted to play hardball with her family relationships. She was about to discover that she'd inherited her competitive instincts from somewhere. And unlike her, we'd been playing this game a lot longer. The dinner proceeded exactly as these family gatherings always had, with one crucial difference. I found myself watching Emma with the detached fascination of someone observing a performance, noting every calculated gesture and rehearsed response. She laughed at David's jokes about golf, asked Linda about her grandchildren with apparent interest, and accepted compliments about her New York opportunity with just the right mixture of humility and pride. But I caught the moments when she thought no one was watching. The way her fork paused halfway to her mouth when Sarah mentioned how much we'd miss her, the slight tightening around her eyes when old family friend mentioned hoping we'd visit her in New York soon, the way she kept glancing at her watch as if mentally calculating how much longer she had to maintain this charade. Emma was performing the role of beloved daughter for an audience that had no idea the show was ending tonight. "So, Emma," said Carol Mitchell, Sarah's longtime book club friend, "your parents must be so proud. McKinsey is incredibly prestigious. How did you manage to land such a competitive position?" Emma's smile brightened, but I noticed how she avoided looking directly at Sarah or me as she answered. "A lot of hard work and some lucky networking, I suppose. The interview process was intense, but I think my background in strategic analysis really helped set me apart." Her background in strategic analysis. No mention of the private university education that had cost us over $200,000. No reference to the unpaid internships she'd been able to afford because we covered her living expenses. No acknowledgement of the networking opportunities that had come through my business connections. Emma had rewritten her success story to exclude the people who'd made it possible. "And the salary must be incredible," added Tom Henderson, who'd known Emma since she was learning to ride a bike in our driveway. "Those consulting firms really take care of their people." "It's competitive," Emma said modestly, though I caught the flash of satisfaction in her eyes. She was proud of her financial independence, proud that she'd secured a position that would allow her to maintain her lifestyle without any assistance from us. What she didn't realize was that her new salary, impressive as it was, wouldn't come close to covering the kind of life she'd grown accustomed to. The Beverly Hills apartment, the luxury car payments, the designer clothes, the expensive vacations she posted about on social media, all of that had been subsidized by parents who'd never wanted their daughter to worry about money. Parents she'd just informed that their financial support was an unhealthy entanglement she needed to eliminate. "We always knew Emma would do something extraordinary," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying only the slightest tremor that probably no one else would notice. "She's been remarkable since she was little." Emma's expression softened slightly at her mother's words, and for just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the daughter we'd raised, the child who used to run to Sarah with scraped knees and broken toys, confident that mom could fix anything. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by that same polished composure that had characterized her entire performance tonight. "Mom's always been my biggest supporter," Emma said, the words sounding hollow despite their apparent sincerity. "Both my parents have been incredible. Have been, past tense, as if our role in her life was already over." The main course arrived with the kind of choreographed precision that only comes from professional catering. But Sarah had insisted on preparing Emma's favorite dessert herself, chocolate souffle with raspberry coulis, the same recipe she'd been perfecting since Emma was in high school. I watched my wife disappear into the kitchen, her shoulders set with the determination of someone completing one final act of maternal love. Sarah had spent the entire day cooking for our daughter, not knowing it would be the last time Emma would accept such a gesture. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emma was sitting at a table laden with food prepared by a mother she'd just emotionally abandoned, surrounded by people celebrating a marriage she'd decided was too codependent to maintain a healthy relationship with. "Robert," David said, pulling me back to the conversation, "Emma was just telling us about her apartment search in Manhattan. Sounds like quite an adventure." "I'm sure she'll figure it out," I replied evenly. Emma's always been resourceful. Emma shot me a quick look, perhaps detecting something in my tone that didn't match my words. But before she could respond, Sarah returned with individual souffles that looked like works of art. "Oh my God, Mom," Emma breathed, and for the first time all evening her enthusiasm seemed genuine. "You made my favorite." "I wanted tonight to be special," Sarah said simply. The dessert was perfect, as Sarah's cooking always was. Light, decadent, the kind of culinary achievement that comes from years of practice and genuine love for the people you're feeding. Emma savored every bite, closing her eyes with appreciation that reminded me of countless other family dinners when she'd praised her mother's cooking with unguarded delight. But this time, I found myself wondering if she was also saying goodbye. As the evening wound down and guests began making their departure, the compliments flowed in the predictable patterns of successful dinner parties. Sarah accepted praise for her cooking with gracious humility. I received congratulations on 25 years of marriage, with the kind of respect that comes from building something lasting in a world where permanence was increasingly rare. And Emma played her part perfectly, accepting good wishes for her New York adventure and promises to stay in touch that everyone assumed she'd honor. You raised an incredible daughter, Linda whispered to Sarah as she gathered her purse. Emma's going to take Manhattan by storm. Sarah's smile never wavered, though I caught the slight pause before she responded. She's certainly determined to make her own way, without us. By 10 o'clock, we were alone again. The caterers had cleaned up with professional efficiency, leaving our deck restored to its original pristine condition. The only evidence of tonight's celebration was the lingering scent of Sarah's souffle and the slight fatigue that comes from hours of careful social performance. Emma stood by the railing, looking out at the moonlight dancing on the Pacific waves. She'd kicked off her heels and let down her hair, finally allowing herself to drop the perfect daughter act now that the audience was gone. "Thank you for tonight," she said without turning around. "I know the timing of my news wasn't ideal, but I'm glad we could still celebrate your anniversary properly." Properly, as if there was a correct way to navigate having your child announce their intention to abandon you on your wedding anniversary. Sarah began collecting the remaining wine glasses, her movements mechanical and precise. 25 years of hosting dinner parties had made the cleanup routine automatic, but I could see the exhaustion in every gesture. "Emma," Sarah said carefully, "about that document you gave us earlier. Some of those restrictions seem quite severe." Emma turned from the railing, her expression shifting back to the professional demeanor she'd adopted for her earlier ultimatum. "I know they might seem harsh at first, but my therapist says that establishing clear boundaries is essential for breaking codependent patterns." There was that word again, codependent, as if loving your child unconditionally was some kind of psychological disorder that required therapeutic intervention. "And you truly believe that our relationship has been unhealthy?" I asked, genuinely curious about how she'd arrived at this conclusion. Emma's certainty flickered for just a moment. "Not unhealthy exactly, but unbalanced. I've never had to be truly independent because I've always known you'd be there to solve my problems or provide financial support when I needed it." "So we loved you too much," Sarah said quietly. "You enabled me too much," Emma corrected. "There's a difference." Enabled. Another therapy buzzword that reduced decades of parental sacrifice to a character flaw that needed correcting. I found myself thinking about the beach house itself, about the 15 years of memories these walls contained. Emma's 8th birthday party on the deck, complete with a clown and pony rides on the beach. Her high school graduation celebration, when she'd insisted on having the after party here because she wanted to share this special place with her friends. The countless summers when this house had been filled with laughter and teenage voices and the sound of Emma's happiness, all of it now categorized as enabling behavior that had prevented her from developing proper independence. "Well," I said finally, "if independence is what you want, then independence is what you'll get." Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, probably interpreting my response as acceptance of her terms. She had no way of knowing that I'd spent the last 4 hours mentally reviewing every legal document, every financial arrangement, every asset that connected our family together. "I'm glad you understand," she said. "I was worried you'd try to talk me out of it or make this more difficult than it needs to be." "No," I replied calmly. "You're an adult. You get to make your own choices about what kind of relationship you want with your family." Emma smiled for the first time since delivering her ultimatum, genuine relief flooding her features. "Thank you, Dad. I know this isn't easy, but I really think it's what's best for everyone in the long run." What's best for everyone? As if devastating your parents was actually a favor you were doing them. Sarah finished collecting the glasses and disappeared into the kitchen, probably seeking a few moments of privacy to process the emotional whiplash of the evening. Emma began gathering her purse and keys, clearly eager to escape now that she'd accomplished her mission. "I should probably head home," she said. "Early flight to New York next week. Lots to organize." "Of course," I said. "Don't let us keep you." Emma paused at the sliding door, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. For just a moment, I thought she might be having second thoughts about the boundaries she'd established. Maybe some part of her recognized the magnitude of what she was walking away from. But the moment passed, and her resolve returned. "Good night, Dad. Thank you again for understanding." She disappeared into the house, her footsteps echoing through rooms that had witnessed her entire childhood. I heard her say goodbye to Sarah in the kitchen, heard the front door open and close, heard her car start in the driveway below. And then she was gone, leaving behind only the transition plan document that Sarah had left on the outdoor table like evidence of a crime. Sarah returned a few minutes later, her composure finally beginning to crack now that we were truly alone. "She really means it, doesn't she?" Sarah asked, sinking into the chair Emma had occupied earlier. "She's actually going to cut us out of her life." "She thinks she is," I confirmed. 23 years, Robert, 23 years of putting her needs first, of making every decision based on what would be best for Emma. And this is how she repays us. I could hear the pain in Sarah's voice, the bewilderment of a mother who devoted her life to raising a child only to be told that her love was actually harmful. "She'll regret this," Sarah continued, tears beginning to flow again. "Someday she'll realize what she threw away, and by then it might be too late to fix it." Maybe she would regret it. Maybe years from now, Emma would look back on this night and recognize the cruelty of what she'd done. Maybe she'd understand that unconditional love wasn't the same thing as enabling, that parents who sacrificed for their children weren't automatically codependent. But maybe she wouldn't. Maybe this was simply who Emma had become, someone capable of reducing family relationships to business transactions and emotional connections to boundary violations. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. "Sarah," I said gently, "tomorrow morning we're meeting with Margaret to make some changes to our estate planning." Sarah looked up at me through her tears. "What kind of changes?" I picked up Emma's transition plan document, scanning through the carefully typed restrictions she'd outlined for our future relationship. No unscheduled contact, no financial assistance, no visits without advance notice, no involvement in major life decisions. Emma wanted to be independent. She wanted to be free from the financial and emotional entanglements that had defined our relationship. I was about to give her exactly what she'd asked for. "The kind of changes that will teach our daughter what independence actually costs," I said. Sarah studied my face in the moonlight, reading the determination that had carried me through decades of business challenges and personal obstacles. Slowly, she began to nod. "She thinks she can just rewrite our family dynamic whenever it becomes inconvenient for her," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "She thinks we'll just accept being managed like difficult clients instead of respected like the parents who gave her everything." She's about to learn otherwise. I thought about the beach house around us, about the 15 years of mortgage payments that had secured this piece of paradise, about the property taxes, the maintenance costs, the insurance premiums that had kept it in perfect condition, about the summers when Emma had invited friends here, treating the place like her personal resort while we handled all the expenses and responsibilities. Emma probably assumed she'd inherit this house someday, along with our other properties, our investment accounts, our carefully accumulated wealth that represented decades of hard work and strategic planning. She'd built her independence plan around the assumption that our love was unconditional enough to survive any treatment she chose to dish out, that parents were obligated to provide for their children regardless of how those children chose to behave. She was about to discover the difference between unconditional love and unlimited tolerance. The ocean waves continued their eternal rhythm against the rocks below our property, indifferent to human drama and family betrayals. Tomorrow, this house would still be here. The views would still be spectacular. The private beach would still offer the same pristine sanctuary that had made this property so valuable. But Emma's connection to any of it was about to change permanently. "What exactly are you planning?" Sarah asked. I looked out at the Pacific, at the moonlight creating silver pathways across water that stretched to the horizon. Emma had grown up with this view, had taken it for granted the same way she'd taken everything else we'd provided. "I'm planning to give our daughter the most educational experience money can buy," I said. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Then, slowly, she reached for my hand. "She chose this," Sarah said firmly. "We didn't force her to hand us that document or make those demands. She chose to treat us like obstacles to her happiness instead of people who loved her." Yes, I agreed. She did. The decision felt surprisingly peaceful once I'd made it. For months, I'd been watching Emma drift away from us, becoming more distant and critical with each visit. I'd attributed it to career stress, to the natural process of a young adult establishing independence. I'd never imagined that she was actually building a case against us, cataloging our love and support as evidence of dysfunction. But Emma had shown me exactly who she'd become tonight, Someone capable of devastating the people who'd sacrificed everything for her happiness. Someone who could reduce 23 years of unconditional love to therapeutic buzzwords and boundary violations. Someone who needed to learn that actions have consequences, even when those actions are directed toward people who love you. Especially then, I squeezed Sarah's hand and stood up from the table, feeling lighter than I had in months. The weight of trying to maintain a relationship with someone who no longer valued it was finally lifting from my shoulders. Come on, I said to my wife. Let's go to bed. We have a big day tomorrow. As we walked into the house together, I could already imagine the conversation with Margaret Walsh. The phone calls to financial institutions, the paperwork that would need to be filed, the systematic dismantling of every safety net Emma had assumed would always exist. Emma wanted independence from financial entanglements. She was about to get more independence than she'd ever dreamed possible. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after major storms have passed through, leaving the air clean and possibilities endless. I dressed in my best charcoal suit, the one I wore for the most important business meetings, the kind where millions of dollars changed hands with the stroke of a pen. Margaret Walsh's law office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered commanding views of the city below, the kind of space that conveyed serious money and serious consequences, where wealthy families came to protect their legacies from ungrateful heirs and gold-digging relatives. Robert, Sarah, Margaret greeted us with the professional warmth of someone who'd been handling delicate family situations for decades. I have to say, your call yesterday was quite intriguing. Estate planning changes on an anniversary weekend usually indicate some significant family developments. Significant is one way to put it, I replied, settling into the leather chair across from her mahogany desk. Sarah sat beside me, her posture perfectly composed despite the emotional devastation of the previous evening. Margaret opened a thick file folder that contained our current estate documents: wills, trusts, power of attorney designations, beneficiary arrangements that had been carefully structured to minimize tax implications while providing generously for Emma's future. Before we discuss changes, Margaret said, help me understand what's prompted this review. Is Emma experiencing any difficulties, health issues, substance abuse problems? Nothing like that, I said. Emma is perfectly healthy and successful. She's just decided that she no longer wants to maintain a relationship with her parents. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. In 30 years of family law practice, she'd seen every permutation of family dysfunction, but this scenario still caught her attention. She's moving to New York for work, Sarah added, her voice steady despite the pain I knew she was carrying. And she's informed us that our relationship has become too codependent. She's established boundaries that essentially eliminate us from her life. I see, Margaret said carefully, and I assume these boundaries extend to her expectations about inheritance? That's what we need to discuss, I replied. Emma wants complete independence from us. I think we should give her exactly what she's asking for. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting to the calculating look of someone mentally reviewing legal strategies and potential complications. Robert, I want to make sure I understand your intentions here. Are you talking about modest adjustments to encourage better behavior, or are you considering more substantial changes? I'm talking about complete disinheritance, I said calmly. Emma wants to be free from financial entanglements with her parents. I want to ensure she gets that freedom permanently. The words hung in the air like smoke from expensive cigars. Margaret made a few notes on her legal pad, her expression neutral, but her mind clearly working through the implications. That's certainly within your rights, she said finally. But I have to ask, is this decision being made in anger? Sometimes families experience temporary rifts that heal over time, and permanent legal changes can create irreversible consequences. This isn't anger, I said, though I could feel Sarah's surprise at my certainty. This is respect for Emma's explicitly stated wishes. She doesn't want our financial support or emotional involvement. I'm simply ensuring that her independence is complete and permanent. Margaret turned to Sarah. And you're in agreement with this approach? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her wrestling with 23 years of maternal instincts that screamed against abandoning her child, even a child who'd abandoned her first. Emma handed us a document, Sarah said finally, a typed plan explaining exactly how little she wants us involved in her future. She treated our love like a business contract that needed renegotiation. Her voice grew stronger with each word. If that's how she sees our relationship, Then maybe it's time we started treating it like a business arrangement too. Margaret nodded slowly. I understand the emotional context, but I need to ensure you're both thinking clearly about the financial implications. Your current estate is valued at approximately $12 million. dollars. The beach house alone is worth nearly $3 million. These aren't trivial amounts we're discussing, which is exactly why this decision matters, I replied. Emma has assumed that our wealth would eventually be hers, regardless of how she treated us. That assumption needs to be corrected immediately. Very well, Margaret said, pulling out fresh legal documents. Let's discuss your options. Complete disinheritance is straightforward, but given the size of your estate, you'll want to consider establishing alternative beneficiaries to avoid tax complications. For the next 2 hours, we worked through the technical details of dismantling Emma's financial future. Charitable foundations that would receive our assets instead of an ungrateful daughter. Educational scholarships for deserving students who'd never take their opportunities for granted. Environmental conservancies that would protect coastal properties like our beach house for future generations who'd actually appreciate them. There's one more element I'd like to add, I said as Margaret prepared the final documents. I want Emma to know about these changes immediately. Margaret paused in her typing. Robert, that's unusual. Most people prefer to keep estate changes private until after death, to avoid family drama. Emma created the drama when she decided to treat us like toxic influences she needed to manage, I replied. She should understand the consequences of her choices while she's still young enough to learn from them. How do you want to handle notification? I thought about Emma's transition plan, about the calculated cruelty of timing her ultimatum to coincide with our anniversary celebration, about the way she'd sat at our table last night, eating food prepared with love while mentally cataloging all the ways we'd supposedly damaged her with our devotion. I want her to receive a complete copy of the new estate documents, I said, along with a letter explaining exactly why these changes were necessary. Margaret finished typing and printed multiple copies of documents that would reshape our family's financial future with surgical precision. As I signed each page, I felt the same satisfaction that came from closing a particularly challenging business deal. Emma had negotiated herself right out of a multi-million-dollar inheritance. There is one final consideration, Margaret said as we prepared to leave. These changes are legally binding, but they're not irreversible. If circumstances change, if Emma recognizes her mistakes and genuinely seeks reconciliation, you could modify the documents again. That's good to know, I said, though privately I doubted Emma possessed the self-awareness necessary for genuine remorse. But I suspect Emma is going to be far too busy enjoying her independence to worry about repairing relationships with people she considers codependent. We left Margaret's office with copies of documents that had just transformed Emma from a wealthy heiress into someone who'd need to fund her own future entirely through her own efforts. The irony wasn't lost on me. We'd given Emma the most valuable gift possible, the opportunity to discover what she was actually capable of when she couldn't rely on her parents' resources. How do you want to tell her? Sarah asked as we drove toward home. I don't want to tell her, I replied. I want to show her. That afternoon, while Sarah rested from the emotional exhaustion of the weekend, I sat in my home office composing the most important letter I'd ever written. Not a business proposal or contract negotiation, but a final communication with the daughter who decided we were obstacles to her happiness rather than people who devoted our lives to her success. Dear Emma, congratulations on your new position with McKinsey and your upcoming move to New York. As you requested, we're respecting your need for independence by making some adjustments to our family arrangements. Enclosed, you'll find copies of our updated estate planning documents. As you can see, we've taken your transition plan seriously and implemented some transitions of our own. Since you've determined that financial entanglements with your parents are unhealthy, we've eliminated those entanglements completely. The beach house you grew up loving will be donated to the California Coastal Conservancy, ensuring that future families can enjoy the same memories you once treasured there. Our investment portfolios will fund educational scholarships for students who understand the value of family support. Various charitable organizations will benefit from resources that might otherwise have created the kind of codependent relationships you've identified as problematic. You should know that these changes aren't made in anger, but in respect for your clearly stated wishes. You wanted independence from us, and independence requires accepting full responsibility for your own financial future. We're confident that someone with your intelligence and determination will thrive without the enabling behavior that apparently characterized our relationship. We wish you every success in New York and in building the independent life you've chosen. Since you've established that contact should be limited and scheduled, we won't burden you with unwanted communications. You know how to reach us if you ever decide that family relationships might be worth more than therapeutic buzzwords and boundary management. With love and respect for your autonomy, Mom and Dad. I printed the letter on our personal stationery, the elegant cream paper with our family monogram that Emma had always admired. Then I packaged everything together: the letter, the estate documents, the legal proof that Emma's inheritance had evaporated as completely as her commitment to family relationships. The overnight delivery service guaranteed arrival by noon the next day. Emma would be in her Beverly Hills apartment, probably packing for her move to New York, when she discovered that independence came with a price tag she'd never calculated. My phone started ringing at 12:47 p.m. Emma's name flashed on the caller ID, but I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. By 1:15, I'd received 6 missed calls and 3 text messages that grew increasingly frantic with each attempt. The first text was professional. "Dad, I think there's been some mistake with these documents. Please call me." The second showed cracks in her composure. "This can't be real. You can't just cut me out of everything because I asked for some space." The third revealed the panic that was probably just beginning to set in. "I need to talk to you immediately. This is insane." I turned off my phone and went to find Sarah, who was reading on the deck overlooking the Pacific, the same deck where Emma had delivered her ultimatum less than 48 hours earlier. "She got the package," I said. Sarah looked up from her book, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen since Emma's childhood: a fierce maternal protectiveness that had nothing to do with enabling and everything to do with teaching consequences to someone who'd forgotten the difference between love and weakness. "Good," Sarah said firmly. "Let her panic for a while. Let her understand what it feels like to have someone you love make unilateral decisions about your future." My phone, even turned off, seemed to pulse with Emma's desperation from across the house. But for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace with a decision involving our daughter. Emma had taught us that family relationships were negotiable, that love could be restructured according to therapeutic theories and personal convenience. She'd shown us that 23 years of sacrifice could be dismissed as codependent enabling that required professional intervention. Now we were teaching her what happened when parents decided to apply the same standards to their own choices. Emma wanted to be independent. She wanted to be free from the financial entanglements that had apparently poisoned our relationship. She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for, faster than she'd ever imagined possible. And judging by the increasingly desperate tone of her messages, she was beginning to understand that independence wasn't quite as appealing when it came without a multi-million-dollar safety net. The waves continued their eternal rhythm against the rocks below our property, indifferent to human drama and family reckonings. But for Sarah and me, sitting together in the home we'd built through decades of love and partnership, the sound felt like applause. Emma had gambled our family's future on her assumption that parents would always forgive, always provide, always love unconditionally, regardless of how they were treated. She'd just learned that unconditional love didn't mean unlimited tolerance. And sometimes, the most loving thing parents could do was teach their children that actions have consequences, even when those lessons came with a price tag measured in millions. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.